Eisenberg with Scale Up Milwaukee. The Scale Up Milwaukee is a project to accelerate, stimulate, foster, catalyze the entrepreneurship ecosystem in the Milwaukee region. The project is supported actively by a number of local and national partners in no particular order of importance. We have American Express Open, who's been very actively engaged. We have the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, WIDA, the Mayor's Office, and MEDC, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, GMC, and I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. If I do, I apologize, but it's an increasing number of stakeholders because that's how these things work. These things work by getting everybody involved, everybody aligned around growth entrepreneurship. We have with us in our Hangout today, just to remind everybody, these are brief 15-minute Hangout sessions. We have with us, and I hope I don't mispronounce his name, Tom Palzowitz and Jeff DiMartino. Tom has a career, very interesting career in the military and elsewhere, but he's now a business coach with something called Action Coach. Jeff DiMartino is a lawyer with the local office of Foley and Lardner. If I mispronounce any names, don't tell me. Just let's roll forward. Let me just start off with this. A law firm, a national law firm with offices all over the United States and outside. What are you doing here in Milwaukee?
We're headquartered here, actually.
Okay, good. So how did you get started here?
We've been here for 150 years and have a really solid Milwaukee presence. We have 200 or 300 lawyers here, and we have branches all throughout the country in all the major markets. So we have Boston, New York, LA, Chicago, and we serve clients everywhere throughout the country.
So not only are you a service provider to ventures that grow, you yourselves are a venture that has grown.
Yes, correct.
Interesting. So we'll come back to that in a second. And Tom, just give us in one sentence, what does Action Coach do?
Action Coach, we help business owners grow their business and have more time.
And have more time, meaning have more time to grow their business even more, or have more time to do
more balance or whatever they're looking for. So it's really about growing a business that works without them. Okay,
great. So it's a scalable business. So that's really one of the themes here. Not surprisingly, is how do you build a platform that's a scalable platform. But Jeff, as long as we're on it, let me come back. What have been some of the secrets of the, you have a couple hundred lawyers in the Milwaukee region, in the Milwaukee office, and you have, I guess, hundreds outside. What's been the secret to your growth? That's something that I'm sure we could learn from.
Well, I think it starts with the people we recruit here. We recruit people who are really, not only excellent technical lawyers, but people who are business-minded, people who are interested in growing the business, and people, who have grown the firm throughout the years. So in the past, 40, 50 years, Foley has really followed its clients as they've grown from, Wisconsin companies, and we certainly represent the big, most of the big Wisconsin companies. But through word of mouth, and as our companies grow, we've gone where they are too. So we do have the presence in New York and LA and Chicago and Florida and places throughout.
So contrary to what might be the popular perception, apparently in the ground in Milwaukee, there are nutrients for growth. There's probably good stuff, there's probably bad stuff, and there's probably other stuff. Both of you, talk a little bit. Let's start with you, Tom. What do you see as the nutrients for growth here in the Milwaukee region? And of course, we'll talk about some of the toxic factors perhaps as well.
Well, I think the biggest nutrient for growth here is a can-do attitude. I mean, we have this Midwestern work ethic where we need to get out of bed and get something done. And there's a lot of people that really want to do lots for the community, but also help grow their business and create jobs. One of the things I see, we work with lots of different business owners, and we do it ourselves, is the main focus is how do you create an environment that people want to work in and really want to do well, but then also be able to find more people to do that. So I think that's one of the great things about the Midwest is people actually move here to raise a family and have a great lifestyle, and it's really about what kind of jobs we need to have, because after the recession of the 80s and basically the auto industry starting to really move out, it's been what industries are going to pop up that are going to employ people. And as you know, Dan, it's really small businesses that are ones that do most of the employment.
Well, I know it's small businesses that do the current employing, but it's growing businesses that do the future employing, because without growth, you don't have jobs, and you don't have wealth, and you don't have taxes, you don't have a lot of other things. But Jeff, so you're saying it's part of it is mindset, it's work ethic, mindset, attitude, culture in this region. Jeff, how do you see it?
I do agree with all of that, and I think Tom touched on something that's important, which is to say that it is a great place to start a family and to live. And so I think, there are a lot of people who are maybe, young and who leave the Milwaukee area, to go to college, and they, stay in New York or Boston for a while. I was in New York myself for 5 years, and then they moved back to Milwaukee. And it's a great city. We're on Lake Michigan. It's like a mini Chicago, and it's a really, really good place to start a family, and with that in mind, people really want to be here. So it's fostering that.
So does Milwaukee have an image problem? I'll give you an example. I do work in Copenhagen as well. We have a project there, and I was telling them about the water project in Milwaukee, and they said that's really interesting because Denmark is very, very advanced in water related things, and they said that's really interesting. I didn't know Canada had an emphasis on water. So what's we got missing? The image of Milwaukee outside of Milwaukee is different. Why?
Well, I'll jump in on that one, Dan. To me, the biggest thing, and pretty much every business that does really good work has the same issue, is they're usually the best kept secret. And when you're a best kept secret, it's really about how do you get the mindset of we are a great thing, and being able to get the word out there is a lot of times what the difference is. But here in Milwaukee and Wisconsin in general, people do travel and go to other places, but like Jeff said, they come back after a period of time, and they know how great it is. But in addition to that, it's really about, I don't think it's an image problem more than we're just a great secret. And sometimes it's hard to get the secret out to let people know that we do exist.
Personally, as an individual, I like modest people as friends, but from a business perspective and from a growth perspective, is that an asset or is that a liability?
Well, I'm not sure it's either. I think what it really is, it's more like you said, it's a publicity problem more than anything else. And part of what we're doing here in Milwaukee is we're working on cleaning up the internal image we have, because a lot of times people get a viewpoint of what Milwaukee is by the negative information, not the positive information. When you read the newspaper or listen to the news, you don't get a barrage of positive information coming at you. It's usually some kind of negative events that are happening. So I just personally believe the more we can minimize the negative impacts, the more we can show the positive impacts that are really happening.
So if you could characterize a city as a person, which you can, but let's say you can, you would say almost that the region has a bad self-concept. It's got a lot of talent, it's got a lot of strength, it's got brains, it's got muscle, it's got character, but it's kind of a bad self-concept. What do you think about that, you guys?
I wouldn't agree with that. What I would say is that we have confidence, but like you said, we have that Midwestern humbleness. We're not out there touting our capabilities as much as we really need to.
Okay. And Jeff, how do you see it?
I see the same. I think people who are from here and who live here are proud of the city too.
Okay, that's great. Let's go on to another area that I've heard a lot about, and I've also seen. It's the area of finance. How do you see the issue of both the existence of capital, of liquidity, of various kinds for both sides of the balance sheet, for the debt and the equity side of the balance sheet, and not just the existence of it, but how it's deployed? How is the financial market working to grow ventures in the Milwaukee region?
I'll jump in again. I think one of the things that we've seen, and I did spend 15 years in banking in the Wisconsin different banking entities, and one of the things I've seen is that as the larger banks have pulled out of Milwaukee, so to speak, we used to have First Star headquartered here, we used to have M&I headquartered here, and they're no longer here. The larger banks have taken the larger mindset and gone other places, and we've had lots of community banks or smaller business banks pop up, but there always has been a difficult process for smaller business to get the funding they need. Startups generally get lots of attention, larger businesses get lots of attention, but it's the businesses in the middle that usually are bootstrapping their way to success that struggle to find the right place to get money.
Jeff?
I'm relatively new to the area, and from what Tom is saying, I would tend to agree with what I've seen so far as well.
So, Tommy, one of my impressions is, and you talk about the hidden assets, so to speak, are out there in the region, not just in the city, but in the region around Milwaukee. There are maybe hundreds of companies that already have products and services and customers. They're selling. They have people, but for whatever reason, a certain percentage of them, of course, they don't want to grow. They have what's called lifestyle business, but a certain percentage of them, if they had the chance, they would. What is it just finance, or are there other things that are missing to ignite that growth ambition, and also the resources, whatever kind, human, mental, that they'll need to really be players in their markets?
Yeah, and I would have to say it starts with mindset. I think that one of our assets, which is our ability to get up and get things done, really sometimes puts us in the mindset of bootstrapping is the way it has to be. And there is pretty much a high adversity to really using other people's money to grow your business. So there's a general most of the business owners I meet don't like to have what they call debt. And I look at money as two different things. One is debt is using money and not having a plan to pay it back. Financial leverage is using other people's money to grow something. And there tends to be a hesitancy to use financial leverage to grow businesses faster than people are capable. Yeah. So I think that whole mindset sometimes works against us in that regard.
It's the mindset almost like I don't want to owe something before I can actually deliver on it. I want to deliver on it first. Again, it's a nice characteristic maybe as a person, but as a business that's growing, leverage is one of the ways to grow. I mean, what I've told my students and my companies I invest in, I've told them that there are two really dangerous times. One of which is when you really want to grow and start to grow rapidly. That's very risky, because that's when you need the sources of all kinds, including money, to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give to the post-revenue companies, the companies that do have already something out there in the marketplace? What kind of advice are you giving them?
Well, I start with taking them a step back and asking themselves what additional markets do they need to be in. And I always like to think a marketing plan should be based on what the market needs, not what the company thinks they can do. So it's really getting them to take a step back and looking at what's the marketplace that they could penetrate into, and then what are the barriers to actually getting into that marketplace, and what points of leverage do they need to use. But it really starts with more of a mindset change than anything else, because I work with a lot of business owners who have done a great job at bootstrapping, and it's hard for them to let go of the things they've been successful at and embrace the things they don't know that they need to do to take it to the next level.
Right. And Jeff, how do you as a law firm support this kind of growth?
Well, I think we I think we reach out to our local clients as much as we can, but we can always do a better job of getting our name out there in the community.
And in terms of the access to human resources, when I talk to people all over the world who are growing, this is not for startups. Don't really think of it in these terms. They usually think of having a product, getting their first customer, and getting some money. But what they miss a lot of times is the bottleneck for growth for them is going to be people a lot of times, and not just money. Is that when they really want to grow, they look around and say, how do I hire 10 people in the next month or two? And then they say a lot of times, I'm not sure I see the people I need out there. How does Milwaukee stack up in that respect?
Well, I would say, Dan, it actually starts with their ability to lead. If they don't have, I think, good confidence in their leadership skills, they're going to shy away from even thinking about using what we call people leverage, because there are good people out there. It's a matter of finding them and being able to decide, are you the kind of leader that can lead these people to the success of the company? So to me, it starts more with what kind of culture have you created, how good of a delegator are you, how good are you at getting a commitment from people and holding expectations, and having what I call a system of accountability in place to grow versus people accountability, which is hard for most people to really understand and do. So to me, it's more the mindset of if the owner is comfortable in being a leader, there's not an HR problem. There are in pockets in different sectors. Right now, skilled trades are hard to find, but there are a whole bunch of other people that are hard to find too, like good salespeople and engineers and other types of people that are really going to come in and provide value. But when you have a great culture and a great training program, you can take people with great attitudes and get stuff done.
One of the things I've heard, by the way, from a lot of people looking at Milwaukee and comparing, say, the entrepreneurs who may have started in New York or the Valley and come to Milwaukee, they say, wait a second, there's a lot more talent here than I thought, and not only is there a lot more talent, it's also very cost effective. I don't want to call it cheap because I don't think people's time is cheap, but relatively cost effective talent. One is very good work ethic, but also there's a lot of skill, a lot of creative people, and so on. Jeff, is there any particular legal perspective to growth, any particular kinds of advice that you like to give companies, especially post-revenue companies who get the ambition to grow? They get a lot of good advice from Tom. They're getting access to investors, but they need also the legal savviness, at least to some extent, in order to be able to avoid some of the minefields that are out there. What kind of advice are you giving them?
Well, I would tell them, first of all, to reach out to an attorney, whether us or someone else, very early on, because sometimes clients start up and they start making mistakes that are hard to reverse. So you want to make sure you're in front of an attorney probably immediately. That would be the first rule. And then the second is really to just to run things by us. If you have a good attorney, a good attorney won't always try to run the clock on you, and will say, just use your business judgment in this case. We don't need to draft, say, website terms and conditions for you right now. There are other things for you to concentrate on. So make sure when you are listening to your attorney, you don't feel like you're talking to somebody who's just using that moment as an excuse to run the clock on you.
And I think Jeff, you put your finger on it. I've been an entrepreneur, and one of the things you're really afraid of as an entrepreneur, of course, you hear the horror stories of what happens with intellectual property and contracts and so on, but at the same time, you also
and that's really very helpful for the firm to have.
So I'm going to wrap up here because we've promised all of our viewers always that we're 15 minutes. Maybe sometimes we go over a little by a couple. But Tom, I'd like to ask you, within the bounds of confidentiality, can you think of one or two examples of companies, again, post-revenue companies that you see are out there really trying and maybe even succeeding, but maybe under the radar still, to make an impact in their marketplace in the area?
Oh, I actually think there's quite a few, and and a lot of companies I see actually struggle with the same thing. Is they have this great uniqueness, but it's getting the marketplace to understand it. We have a couple of IT companies that we work with that are growing rapidly. We've got an actual baking company. I don't know if you've had a pretzel roll at some point, but that company's doing quite well and is moving out into a much more national level. So there's lots of things that are happening in Milwaukee, I think, that are great, and it's just a matter of time that we start to break down, I think, some borders and move out farther in from the Midwest and actually hit the coasts.
So you mentioned it sounds like it's not just technology, but it can happen in all kinds of sectors, and food and retail and services and logistics and all kinds of things can generate the growth that we're talking about. It's not just about Twitter. Twitter's maybe the aberration, the exception that proves the rule.
Right.
So I'll wrap up. I'll just say a few words about something that we piloted in the first phase of Scale Up Milwaukee. We called it a Scalerator, and that was an intense training program for 12 ventures, 12 post-revenue ventures between $500,000 to about $10 million in revenues. And we worked with them for 6 weeks, bringing in experts, bringing some local faculty and resources, and every single one of them. The challenge was, can you get new visibility to growth in the next 6 months? That was their final project. Show us the new visibility for growth. Every single one of those companies, when they had the tools to do it, and they had the help, and they had the support from their peers to do it, every single one of them saw very specific ways in which they could generate new growth in the next 6 months. Not 5 years, 6 months. So I'll end our hangout with on a positive note, saying that's the kind of growth we're looking for. We do that 10 times more, and we do it 10 times more again. And I think Milwaukee will be getting the reputation. Of course, it has a good reputation, but it'll be getting the branding and the image that it really deserves based on the reality. So thank you, Tom Palkowitz and Jeff DiMartino. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.